And so I think students appreciate authenticity and honesty. So I mean, I think if they're seeing 9 times out of 10, right, they're seeing your love, your passion, your enthusiasm, and you're open and you're honest about all that, then you can also be open and honest about, hey, I'm struggling with this too, and here's a part that I'm critical with, and you can witness for them an honesty and an integrity about that, but also witness for our students what's an appropriate way to give voice to that, that it's being true to yourself, but also being respectful, not being mean-spirited. And so I think that's important too, to witness for the students the appropriate way to give voice to criticism.
So Michael, we have looked at the university as a whole, we've looked at theology as a whole, where you fit in the universe of all these interchangeable parts. But we're in your old classroom today where we took Is God Silent? Let's go down to a micro level. Let's imagine just for a second we are in Dr. Tkacik's class. We know that you're married to a Lutheran as a Catholic, so there is this cross-denominational dialogue or interchange, however you want to say it, occurring in your own personal life. But you also teach world religions and encounter students from a variety of faiths, whether they're, I think we've had some Hindu members of our classroom, or maybe we did have a former Muslim student as well from Morocco. And so with all that said, how do you defend your classroom? Are these students just names on a roll call that pay your bills, or are they someone that you look at and say, this is my student, this is a part of my flock as the shepherd of the classroom? How does that dynamic work for you?
I try really hard to create an environment which is a safe space for us to share the critical aspect of scholarship, a safe space to share our faith if we're so inclined, also a safe space to share our struggles and our criticisms if we're struggling, and to create an atmosphere where every person feels welcome and safe to do that, and to create an environment in which, with respect and humility, we'll be open to others, even if we have to agree to disagree. We will do so with respect and humility. So for me, the classroom is very much a relational dynamic. I come in wanting to create a safe space, and one informed by a type of reciprocated humility and respect for one another, in which we can safely talk about things, question things, struggle with things, disagree about things, but animated by a spirit that we want to learn, we want to grow about one another, about religion, or about our misgivings and struggles. So for me, it's very much a relational dynamic.
When you come into the classroom, one of the things that stood out to me was he always prayed, unless something happened and slipped his mind, but we'd always remind him in that case, hey, we need to pray, set the classroom standard, that we're learning about the Lord and we need to be reverent of that. Not all professors do that. I would say the vast majority of theology professors do. But it makes all the difference. Is that something you still do? And what other things do you do preparing to come into the class?
Yeah, well, I always think ahead in terms of making sure I'm prepared in terms of the content and the reading and instruction in advance of class. But yes, I try to pray before class, and I choose to be at a faith-based institution intentionally and deliberately. My degree is in theology, it's not in religious studies. And theology, the classic definition of theology is faith-seeking understanding. So the starting point is faith, right? And all the critical scholarship and study is in service to support the faith piece. And so I'm privileged that since I'm at a faith-based institution, I can presume the faith, right? Whereas if I guest teach at USF as well, a state school, I cannot presume the faith when I'm teaching at USF, right? So I have to do more of a religious studies. I have to suspend particular claims of objective truths about God in my own, and I have to be careful with my own faith, and I can't lead a class with prayer, right? Whereas in a faith-based institution, I'm able to do that. And so I choose that intentionally, deliberately, because as I said earlier, for me, being a theologian and teacher is my vocation. It's the way I serve the church, it's the way I serve God. And I'd like to think it's the way I serve other people. And so for me, it has to be animated by my faith and informed by my faith. And I'm grateful that I teach in a faith-based institution where I can do theology, right? I can presume the faith. That doesn't mean that every student has to be a person of faith. You know, I'm called upon to teach every student in front of me. And I understand why some people may have trouble and go through periods of doubt and struggle. And I need to create an environment in which my faith calls me to be loving, respectful, even to those who are struggling in the midst of disbelief. And how do we respectfully and with humility engage one another in a loving way to help understand where each one's coming from? So for me, the classroom is animated by faith. It should start by prayer, and that should eventuate in this type of safe space where we're free to be who we are and be wherever we are on the journey, and wherever we are in terms of our belief or doubt.
Certainly want to vocalize just starting class with prayer. As a person of faith, it made all the difference again to me. And so I thank you for starting class that way. But you had mentioned not everyone in a class of 25 or 30 is faith-based, or if they are, maybe of a different tradition. Maybe they are Hindu or Muslim or Buddhist or whatever it may be. How do you deal with people who are critical of Christianity in the classroom? Certainly there is a level of addressing it. It's, you know, if I stood up and say I disagree, we're not just gonna make eye contact and then go right back into
Right.
it, you know, like it didn't happen.
Right.
Because that can be hurtful to someone.
Right.
But how do you, not entertain, but how do you address critical questions that maybe aren't critically thinking but are being critical?
Right.
At what level do you say, hey, maybe we should go office hours and have a one-on-one discussion because it's disruptive?
Right. You know, I think if you create that safe space, in some ways, it's a testimony that you have done that if a student feels comfortable voicing a type of criticism that is critical, right? Hopefully it's done in a way that's respectful, right, and not mean-spirited. And I think at that point, if it's respectful, I think as a teacher, I try to figure out and have them elaborate, what is it that's informing that? So I think part of it is to take it and can you construct it as a teaching and learning moment for the student who's voicing this criticism, as well as a teaching and learning moment for the other students in the classroom. And I think if it's born out of a sincere struggle, and if it's voiced respectfully, there's a way in which that can be done. If it becomes clear that this is something mean-spirited, if there's something deeper rooted in the student's perhaps personal experience, or it's coming across in a way that's a type of hostility that's inappropriate for a classroom that should be a respectful learning environment, then at that point I would never dismiss a student in the class. I would turn the conversation into an invitation to see me during office hours and to try to deal with it more on an individual basis, both through ongoing teaching, but also perhaps more in terms of a more general conversation as a mentor, friend, someone who might be able to help them understand where this is coming from. The vast majority of my experiences is those criticisms, even if they're critical, can be turned into learning experiences. I've been blessed. There's only been a few times in my career where I think there was just genuine mean-spiritedness or conversations that transition from scholarly disagreement to personal attacks. I've been fortunate in that regard. And part of it is you have to witness and exemplify. I can't personally attack other people, right, and especially my students. I have to referee to make sure that one student's not doing that to another student. And for the most part, that has not been my experience with students. They typically are respectful to one another. And then I think also, I think it helps too, right, that yes, I'm a person of faith, and the faith is really important to me, but I'm not without my criticisms.
Yeah.
Right?
Of course.
And so I think students appreciate authenticity and honesty. So I mean, I think if they're seeing 9 times out of 10, right, they're seeing your love, your passion, your enthusiasm, and you're open and you're honest about all that, then you can also be open and honest about, hey, I'm struggling with this too, and here's a part that I'm critical with, and you can witness for them an honesty and an integrity about that, but also witness for our students what's an appropriate way to give voice to that, that it's being true to yourself, but also being respectful, not being mean-spirited. And so I think that's important too, to witness for the students the appropriate way to give voice to criticism.
That's a great answer. And still being in this classroom setting, you teach a variety of students in terms of their progression in their academic career, so to speak. And so you can have a freshman that is fresh out of high school in their parents' house, no idea maybe about faith. Maybe they've just gone to church their entire life and that's all it's been. And so you have that very moldable mind of a freshman versus maybe a seasoned veteran who's been, something you mentioned, you had some of the older classmates who later in life had gone back into a graduate program. And so how do you switch gears? What does that look like teaching an impressionable freshman versus maybe a jaded graduate student?
You know, and you also had asked earlier too about if there's different denominations, in particular like a world religions class. And I think, you know, two things. I always try to share lovingly and with joy and passion my faith. And I try to receive the faith of the other in the same spirit. And even though I believe that I have much to offer in light of my faith in Christ, I also believe that others have something to offer me. I've come to believe that God is able to make God's self known to me through each and every one of my students and their various religious traditions. So again, exemplifying, witnessing this type of openness to diversity, I think is really important. And that's a sensitivity to the students in front of you. That sensitivity also speaks to this question. A freshman is not the same as a graduate student because there's different life experiences and there's different scholarly prerequisites that have already been satisfied. I'm very mindful with my general ed introductory courses for freshmen that this is their first course. Some students are just apathetic and indifferent. Some will come and give it all their best, and some don't want to be there. I mean, that's just sort of the nature of teaching, right? And different people's disposition towards different disciplines. You got to be in tune with each one of them. I will say this though, to the extent that they're attentive and they care, I'm very mindful that they're going to, particularly the freshmen, they're going to see you as the de facto authority. Mm-hmm. And so when I'm introducing different ideas, I need to be mindful that they don't have points of comparison that a graduate student would. They're not as immersed in the discipline field of theology. So when they're hearing something, and this is a challenge to me because when you do it for so long, I use words and vocabulary and I'm thinking thoughts that I'm presuming everybody else knows and they don't. So this is a constant challenge to me. But I need to do that. I need to be mindful that for that particular group, I'm an authority. And I need to lead them into the critical study of religion carefully. Mm-hmm. And because we do need to critically engage things, but I need to honor whatever faith they're bringing to it. I'm not there to destroy their faith. Sometimes our faith needs to be challenged. We need to think about it in new ways. And sometimes we've been taught things that are incorrect and we may need to learn and to pivot and adjust. So part of it is challenging. It can be painful, it can be scary, it can be threatening, and that's part of an academic study of religion. But at the end of the day, my job as a teacher is to guide them through that, preserving their faith and getting them to a point where it's even stronger and they're edified. So I'm very mindful of that. Whereas with the graduate students, I think you can presume a greater degree of life experience, and you can presume a greater storehouse of previous study of theology, so that they know that what they're hearing from you is not the sole voice in the world of religion or theology. There's other voices that look at it differently, and they're able to engage in that type of critical assessment different. And given their life experiences, they're not going to presume you're the de facto authority in all things religious and theological. And so I think you can take greater liberties and license in terms of invoking and provoking, right? Critical thought and efforts to expand religious and theological inquiry with a graduate student that wouldn't be appropriate with an undergraduate student.
I concur. There are times, we'll use your class for example, there are times there's things that you've said that have gone above my head. I really have no idea what Vatican II is, and of course I do now. And then I had many subsequent classes preceding yours that informed me of those things. But at the time, I remember classmates talking about certain philosophical things, Plato, Socrates, and I'm like, when did you read these things? I have no idea about any of this. I've never experienced it. But as a graduate student, now you look at the professor that he's earned or she has earned their place. But ultimately, they have their own spin on things. They have their own life experience, backgrounds, and some great wisdom.